And as silicone picks up so much of the detail, it could end badly. Hey, welcome back to my channel. It's Wendy here from Toonpish Crafts, and I hope you're doing okay. Now, you may have noticed in my videos over the last few weeks, I've been trying out the Let's Resin mixer. I also use, or have used quite a lot, the Estoyo mixer. And I'm going to have a look today at both mixers. I'm not going to compare them. I'm just going to say the good and bad points of both mixers. And obviously I've got to make something in the video, so I'm going to have fun with whatever it is I choose to make. I don't know what it is yet. So this is the electric resin mixer master from Let's Resin. As with most of Let's Resin products at the moment, they are using the baby blue, and I do love this baby blue. It's a rechargeable unit with a USB to USB-C charging cable that takes 3 to 4 hours to charge, and it does say in the instructions not to use a fast charging cable, just the standard charging cable. It has a battery indicator as well as a low battery indicator. It has AI feature with a memory, so it will remember the last thing you have it switched on to. It has an adjustable sand with a silicone base, and it has a forward and reverse stirring motion with 150, 200 and 300 RPM. It also bleeps when it's finished mixing. So I've been using this mixer now for about 6 weeks. I have a good understanding of how it works. And even when I was unpacking this, a big bugbear for me, the length of the cable. We need longer cables. It's a USB to USB-C, which is great, but it's so short. Now you can adjust the height of the mixer by twisting the dial on the right hand side of the unit. That would enable you to lower the paddle into resin. Personally, I don't use that method. It has 3 different speeds and an indicator to explain what speed you're on. The battery indicator is at the top and the AI function is on the side with an indicator on the front. It's not too loud and isn't too large. Now I've kind of put 2 videos in one with this video. This was going to be a separate video, but I decided to use it together with the mixer so that you can see both in action. I'm using a wooden cookie mould, some Let's Resin silicone, and I'm going to mix the Let's Resin silicone up and pour it into the wooden cookie mould. Now I have done this before, so I know the outcome, but I wanted to show you what would happen. This is a bog standard cookie mould bought from Amazon, designed for you to use as a cookie template, and there are plenty of designs on Amazon. I'm mixing up the Let's Resin silicone, just enough to pour into the Mr. and Mrs. Gingerbread Man mould. Now Let's Resin silicone is really good at degassing itself, but with thick moulds it is always a good idea, if you have a degassing machine, to use it. And it only takes about 3 minutes. So if I'm pouring something that's really thick, I do tend to use the degassing machine with it. And Let's Resin will be linked in the description box below, together with a 10% discount code. If you want to purchase anything from Let's Resin, then 10% off is always worth having. I stopped the machine just after 3 minutes because the gas had completely dissipated, and I was left with a super clear silicone. Now I got my Mr. and Mrs. Gingerbread cookie mould, and I haven't done anything to it. This is as it was purchased, just plain wood. Now I started trying this a little while ago, and I figured out how to make the best of these wooden moulds. Wood is porous, and as things are porous, they have little divots and holes in them. The engraving on these wooden moulds is fine for cookies, but the detail is a little scratchy. And as silicone picks up so much of the detail, it could end badly. So a few hours later, I think this is about 4 or 5 hours later, I decided to demold. It took a little effort to get the silicone out of the cookie mould, but it did come out with a little bit of a struggle. The detail is all there, but it has picked up all the little scratchiness. It has like fluffs of hair on it where the wood has flaws in it. Now I'm guessing when they make these moulds, they don't go in with a high grit sander to sand out all the little details. I would imagine that is quite hard to do. And all those details come out with silicone. And you can see all the little imperfections, the tufts of hair, and the detail is a little off. So I'm mixing up some 2-part epoxy resin. This is Let's Resin 2-part epoxy. I've put the mix on the AI mixing program, which takes 4 minutes. It changes direction every now and then from forward to backward, so it gives a good mixing action. You can walk away and do something else knowing that it will do its job and mix for you instead of you standing there for 4 minutes mixing yourself. And once it has finished, it bleeps. Now I do tend to turn it on a little once I've pulled up the paddle from the resin, just to get rid of the excess resin. But you can just let it drip onto the nice little silicone mat and clean it up afterwards. Once it's mixed, it is always necessary to scrape the edge of the cups because there will be unmixed resin on the edges and the bottom. But that's a given with any mixer. So now I have my mixed resin, I'm just going to use a very, very small amount. I mixed up quite a lot of resin. I do have other products on the side that I'm using it for. But for this piece, I needed a tiny, tiny amount. I started to use a paintbrush to wipe over this mould with a paintbrush, and then I got in with my gloves because it makes so much more sense. Once I had covered this mould in resin, I decided to use a dry paintbrush to take out any excess resin in the detail of this mould. The last thing I want to do is fill up the detail with resin, which detracts from the detail itself. So I made sure I got out any spare resin from those little tiny areas with a dry brush. What I want to do here is to smooth out this wooden mould surface. So hopefully the resin will fit in the little tiny hair holes and the scratch marks, but not the detail of the mould itself. I still want to keep that, but it should give me a smoother surface so that when I pour the silicone into these wooden moulds, I get a better finish on the silicone. That's the plan. And just so you know, I do wash out my paintbrushes whenever I've used them with resin with isopropyl alcohol, and they come up as good as new. You don't have to throw away good paintbrushes even if they're covered in resin. The following day my resin is cured up nicely and I can now pour more silicone into these little gingerbread people and make hopefully better silicone inlays. If you're watching my content and you like what you see, how about pushing that subscribe button? It doesn't cost anything and it definitely helps my channel out. And if you have any questions, use the comment section below and I will do my best to answer them. So about 4 hours later and I can demold. And this time they came out of the mould super easily. And you can see the difference between the two. The one on the left has no coverage. The one on the right is shinier. It's not 100% shiny, but it's quite a lot shinier. And the detail is a lot crisper. There's no tufts of hair. There's no scratchiness on them. And it's definitely worked. Now, I have done this a few times and I would say this. Don't put too much resin on your wooden mould because you can ruin the detail of the wood itself. Just do it really lightly with a gloved hand. Make sure you take out the resin from the detail itself. Now I am going to do a quick make with these two just to show you what they look like when they're in resin. I'm using Inferno, which is one of Emma's colours, that's the Tiny Turner, and these colours are available on toonpish.com. And Inferno is the closest one I could find to ginger, and to be honest with you, it's such a beautiful colour I had to use it. I mean, it is ginger really, isn't it? It's a browny gold colour, absolutely stunning. And I'm just going to cover all 4 of these gingerbread people in Inferno. That's all I'm going to do, is cover them completely. Won't put you through the whole process because you can see what I'm doing. I'm making sure I'm keeping the 2 pairs separate so that we can see when they're turned out in the resin piece the difference that it makes. And even just after dusting it, you can see the difference in how shiny they are. So back to the mixer, and I'm going to use the mixer again to make up some more resin. Turning it on, and it's remembered my AO function, so I don't have to mess around, it does it all for me. This time I used the silicone cup, which works perfectly well with the machine. Scraping the sides and the bottom as normal. And I'm dividing the resin into 2 different cups, one smaller than the other, because I'm going to add some glitter. This is Hemway glitter. It is a beautiful holographic silver glitter, and I'm going to pack this resin in true Claire style. That's Claire from Claire's Crafty Corner, packing the glitter in. I want this resin full of glitter. Hemway is amazing at making glitter, and this is a chunky glitter. I have here a mould for a plate, which I've used before in resin videos, and all I'm doing is pouring the chunky glitter around the outside edge. I do spill a little bit on the surface, and I was going to clear it up later, but when I started to clear it up, I actually thought, oh, you know what, I'd like to keep that just to add a little bit more of interest. So the rim of this mould, this is rather a large plate mould, again bought from Amazon, which will be linked in my Amazon storefront at the bottom of the description page, the more info tab underneath the video. And I'm just filling the rim up with this holographic glitter. Hopefully it will make a really nice rim to this plate mould. So once I'm happy that the rim is completely full of glitter, then I'm going to use the rest of the clear resin as a base plate across the bottom of the mould, top of the mould, which will be the bottom of the plate, if you see what I mean. And I just about had enough resin, so I'm using a heat gun just to make sure it spreads out right the way across this mould. I don't mind if the glitter seeps up just above the rim. It doesn't worry me at all. I'm not keen on it to go right the way across the bottom, however, because I'm going to put the little gingerbread man face down in this resin, and I want them to be the main focus. Now I was going to give these inlays a coat of resin like I would normally do with inlays, but I want you to see, and I want to see, the difference in the detail without coating them first. So they are both just going directly into the resin, face down. And I want them to cure up nicely, so I'm going to use another project that I'm testing out for Let's Resin, and that is their curing dome. About 4 hours later and I can go on to layer 2. Now I have some silver Christmas leaf decorations. I bought this years ago. I have no idea where I bought it. It got to have been some kind of craft store. But I've cut them up into small pieces and I'm going to lay them down in this tray. I'm not taking out the inlays at this point. They don't have a lot of resin around them. So I'm pouring another layer of resin. Hopefully that resin will seep underneath the detail a little bit more to give the gingerbread people a little bit more depth. So this is the second layer of resin. I'm going to push these little silver, they are plastic, they're not real, and they're glittered, kind of a holographic glitter as well. Well, just silver glitter really. And I'm pushing them down and I'm going to go right the way around the outside edge with these. While I'm doing that, let me just run through the mixer with you. It's AI, it's rechargeable, it has a sturdy stand with a silicone base. While I've had this mixer for 6 weeks, I've only ever charged it once, and that was at the beginning. And that was because I didn't realise it was already charged. It's easy to clean, it's easy to use, it grips well in the stand, and overall I really like it. The following day I can take the silicone inlays out. They just peel out. And with any chameleon pigment, it is more beneficial to put black behind it. Now, I don't want black behind this silver tray, although it could look really cool. You can see here the difference between the pairs. The one on the left is the shiny version, the one on the right was straightforward in the wooden mould. Now, you could argue that they just look matte rather than shiny, but there are numerous amount of details on there that make it look rough. I'm going to use some black polyurethane resin just to fill up the gingerbread family. This is the type that I'm using. It's from MB Fiberglass and you can get it here in the UK. I don't think they send abroad, but I will put their link in the description box below. You only have to stir this stuff for 30 seconds. You don't get much time at all. So I've used a little disposable paper shot glass and I'm just pouring the black into the recesses of the gingerbread family alone. I'm only using polyurethane for quickness. You can use 2-part epoxy resin, but then you would have to wait for it to cure for a few hours. Even if you use fast cure, you still have to wait at least 2 or 3 hours to do the next layer. With this polyurethane, you have to wait half an hour, so it's ideal for quickness. I sprayed it with isopropyl alcohol to get rid of bubbles, but there was no need really. It's going to have a backing colour, and I'm going to use this little piggy pigment in Unicorn. It's an amazing blue shimmer colour. Now, I needed to make quite a lot of resin this time, so I decided to make one large amount, divide it into 2 cups, and use both mixers side by side to see the differences. They both work really well. That's the Estoyo mixer and the Let's Resin mixer. The Estoyo one I've used for quite a long time. It again has an AI feature. You can walk away for 4 minutes and let it do its thing. It doesn't bleep to tell you that it's done, but it mixes perfectly well. And to be honest with you, it has a short lead as well. Even though you don't need to plug it in while it's using it because it's rechargeable, I still like a longer lead. Anyway, not dwell on the lead because they wind me up. So I've got my resin mixed. I am mixing in the unicorn colour in one part of the resin. The other one I'm leaving clear. Now, I've not left this resin to get warm. It is literally as soon as I've mixed it and added in the colour, I am pouring it. I am happy for these 2 resins to mix slightly, and they will. Unless I left them to get really warm, they would stay separate. I just want an amalgamation of clear and coloured resin on the back of this piece. Just for fun, really, for no other reason. Now, in hindsight, I do wish I'd used a darker colour. I think a dark blue would have looked better, but I like the way that the colour is mashed up, kind of mottled looking from the front. Once I've poured the clear and the colour in, then I'm using a little bit of a heat just to whoosh it around a little, not a great deal. It's on a low setting, this heat gun. This is the following day. I am really looking forward to this, but I did mess up slightly. I completely forgot about the last part of the resin that I poured in, went under the lip of the mould, and I did end up with quite a lot of bubbles around the lip which I had to sort out. But the tray itself, in my opinion, looks childlike and amazing. You can see the difference between the first pair of inlays and the second pair of inlays, and in my opinion the second pair are far superior to the first pair. That's just a little bit of resin on a wooden mould. Now I do have some of these inlays available on toonpish.com. Just because I made them and I have the mould, I can make a few more. If you're interested, go check out toonpish.com. These are the bubbles that I was saying about. I did fill them with UV resin and I sanded them down so they're not sharp. I just thought this would make an ideal tray for Santa's cookies and Rudolph's carrots. I finished the tray off with the wording cut from my X tool at M1. I don't suggest for 1 minute that resin should be used for food of any kind other than a decorative item. So as I said before, this video was 2 in 1. It was a trial of the mixer, which I thoroughly loved, and making silicone inlays from a wooden cookie mould. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. Come back and see me next week, because you never know what I'm going to be up to. I never know what I'm going to be up to. Have a great week. Happy crafting, and bye for now.